My name is Stacy Ward. I'm the CEO for PWSA USA, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Jim Youakim, who is the President of Clinical Development for Acadia Pharmaceuticals, focusing on medications that treat rare diseases. In this role, Dr. Youakim oversees the clinical studies of carbetocin nasal spray for, for hyperphagia and PWS. He's a trained psychiatrist and has worked in the pharmaceutical industry for over 18 years. And he's most recently worked on a treatment for Rett syndrome, which was very, very exciting from our perspective to see that happen. So thank you for that. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Youakim.
Great. Thanks very much, Stacy. Can everybody see my slides okay? Is it on the screen? Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you all to talk about the clinical studies of carbetocin nasal spray, which is an investigational drug, as Stacy said, to treat hyperphagia in people with PWS. Just going to go through some slides and have a short video at the end. First, I'd like to tell you about Acadia Pharmaceuticals. Our focus is on neuroscience. We have about 500 employees. We're based in San Diego, and we also have an office in Princeton, New Jersey. And you can see our purpose and our values here on the screen. Our purpose is to fight disease so that more of you shines through, and our mission is to elevate life. We focus on disorders for which there are no approved therapies currently. In 2016, we got FDA approval for a medicine that treats hallucinations and delusions associated with Parkinson's disease psychosis. And in March 2023, we received FDA approval for a treatment of Rett syndrome, as Stacy mentioned, in adults and pediatric patients 2 years of age and older. So like Prader-Willi syndrome, Rett syndrome is a rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorder. It occurs with about the same frequency as Prader-Willi syndrome. The Rett syndrome program was our first program in a rare disease, and Prader-Willi syndrome is our second rare disease. One of the characteristics of Prader-Willi syndrome is a deficiency of a naturally occurring hormone called oxytocin. It's been consistently found that people with PWS have fewer oxytocin-producing neurons. In a mouse model of PWS called the MAGEL2 mouse model, improvement was seen when the mice were given oxytocin. In humans, the hormone oxytocin regulates several functions in the body, including hunger, anxiety, social behavior, and bonding. So oxytocin deficiency is associated with hyperphagia and behavioral issues in people with Prader-Willi. Carbetocin is an investigational medicine that's very much like the naturally occurring hormone oxytocin. But it is thought to bind to oxytocin receptor with greater sensitivity than oxytocin itself. That means it's potentially more potent at activating the receptors on cells that oxytocin activates. So intravenous carbetocin has been used for years in over 90 countries around the world, and it's to prevent postpartum hemorrhage. We're looking at the potential role of carbetocin nasal spray for the treatment of hyperphagia in PWS. Now, some of you may be aware that there was a clinical study of carbetocin nasal spray for hyperphagia in PWS. That was conducted by a company called Levo Therapeutics. This was a phase 3 study, which means it was intended to produce efficacy and safety results that could lead to approval by the FDA. The study was called CARE PWS. So I'll tell you a little bit about that study. That study included 119 participants between the ages of 7 and 19 who were treated with carbetocin nasal spray in one of 2 doses or placebo for 8 weeks. That study failed to achieve the primary objective, which was to show improvement of hyperphagia at the higher dose of carbetocin. But in a separate analysis, the low-dose carbetocin treatment showed improvement. In January 2022, the FDA denied the approval of carbetocin for hyperphagia and PWS, citing insufficient efficacy of the high dose, and recommended that an additional study confirming the efficacy of the low dose be performed. So carbetocin is still an investigational drug, and the safety and efficacy of this drug have not been established or approved by the FDA. That's what we're doing, we hope, in this study. So Acadia acquired Levo Therapeutics and is conducting the phase 3 study to investigate the safety and efficacy of the low-dose carbetocin for hyperphagia and PWS. The goal of the study is to collect data on the benefit and safety of carbetocin nasal spray to support another application to FDA to try to have the drug approved for use in clinical care. So the main study is 12 weeks long. Half the participants received carbetocin nasal spray 3 times a day, and the other half received a placebo nasal spray 3 times a day. So participants will be randomly selected to get the carbetocin nasal spray or the placebo nasal spray. Neither they nor the doctor nor Acadia will know which one they're getting. There will be 170 participants in all, so that means 85 people in each group, one carbetocin and one placebo. We started enrolling in this study in November of 2023, and enrollment is ongoing. Now, after the 12 weeks, participants may enroll in what's called an open label extension study, which means another clinical study in which every participant receives carbetocin nasal spray. Here are some key criteria that must be met for a participant to be eligible to enter the main study. The study is for people aged 5 to 30 who have Prader-Willi syndrome and who have evidence of a mutation causing Prader-Willi syndrome. They also have to have hyperphagia, that is increased appetite and decreased satiety, accompanied by food-seeking behavior. Then there are some reasons patients cannot enter the study, participants cannot enter the study. Some of these are participants cannot enter if they have an active upper respiratory tract infection, if they have any cerebrovascular disease, or a history of brain trauma or epilepsy. If they've started any new food-related interventions within the previous month, or if they've participated in another research study of another treatment within the previous 6 months. And there are other criteria as well. So other assessments will be done if a participant goes to an investigative site, and participants' medical history will be reviewed to determine if they're eligible. So this is a diagram of the study called the Compass PWS study, showing again the fact that half the participants will be randomly assigned to get carbetocin nasal spray, and the other half will be randomly assigned to get placebo nasal spray. There will be 5 clinic visits in the study, including a screening visit to check that the participant qualifies for the study, and then within 3 weeks, what we call a baseline visit. And at that visit, either carbetocin nasal spray or placebo nasal spray is started. And then there are 3 more clinic visits at week 2, week 8, and week 12. And then as it shows on the right-hand side, after that, the participant may go into the open label extension for up to 36 months. This, the Compass PWS study has a website. It's compasspws.com. The website includes more information on the main study and on the open label extension. And the site also has a way to identify locations where eligible participants can join the study. I'd like to show you a video. It's a short video about 3 minutes long, which is also found on the website about how the study is conducted.
Thank you for learning about the COMPASS PWS study for people with Prader-Willi syndrome. Participation in a clinical study is an important part in the development of potential new medicines for treating PWS and its symptoms. The purpose of this study is to learn more about a study drug called carbetocin nasal spray in people with PWS who have hyperphagia, also known as excessive appetite. Carbetocin nasal spray binds to oxytocin receptors with greater sensitivity than oxytocin, a naturally occurring hormone. In the study, carbetocin nasal spray, or placebo, is inhaled through the nose 3 times each day. This study will last approximately 19 weeks. It will involve a maximum of 5 visits to the study center, as well as up to 2 telephone or video calls. During the study treatment period of the main study, eligible participants will be randomly assigned, like flipping a coin, to study treatment with either the study drug or placebo, an inactive substance that looks like the study drug but contains no active ingredient. The study treatment is taken 3 times a day as a nasal spray at mealtimes, if possible, for up to 12 weeks. Upon completion of the 12-week study treatment period, participants will be invited to enroll in COMPASS PWS OLE, a long-term open-label extension study in which all participants will receive carbetocin nasal spray for up to 36 months. Participants who do not continue in the open-label extension study will receive a follow-up phone or video call 30 days after the last dose of study drug. The study drug, clinic visits, and study-related procedures are provided at no cost. Participants and caregivers may also receive reimbursement for their time and travel expenses. Talk to the study staff for more information about this. Please ask any questions you may have about the study. Also, be sure to review the informed consent form, which explains the study in more detail, including procedures, risks, and potential side effects, as well as the rights and responsibilities of participating families. Thank you for learning more about the COMPASS PWS study. With the help of families like yours, we can discover potential new treatment options for people with Prader-Willi syndrome.
Almost went over it again, but so thank you very much. I really appreciate you all joining us today and hearing about this study. We hope some of you may be interested in participating in the study. And the whole Acadia team thanks you guys for all considering participating, but basically for all your support that all of you give us for this program. And just for the welcome you've given us into the community. So with that, I guess if anybody has any questions, we can go to that. Stacey, Dorothea.
Thank you, Jim. That was fantastic. Folks, if you have questions, the Q&A is open. We have some questions, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Jim, I have a parent asking, how many people have been enrolled so far? Is this study just in the US or other countries as well?
Yes, enrollment is well on its way. We are nowhere near being finished, though. We're a little bit over a quarter of the way through. And yes, I don't think I mentioned, so we are going to have enrollment sites in the US, Canada, the UK, and then 5 other European countries.
Okay, that's great. There's another question here that looks like a statement. So I'm just going to read it as is. Side effects noted with high dose.
Well, that might be a question.
It might be.
The main side effects noted with the high dose were headache and flushing, redness. Those were the main things.
Okay. Another question, is there financial assistance for travel?
Yes, there is financial assistance for travel. So if you go to one of the investigative sites, and you contact them about screening to see if you're eligible for the study. They will have more details about it.
Okay, perfect. Folks, if any of you have any follow-up questions, please go ahead and put that in the Q&A also. Any idea when Baltimore will be opening?
I think Baltimore should be opening soon. If it's not open already, I think it's just open.
So for those of you who are joining us this evening, if you've saved the website for the actual trial site, you can follow the website, and you can also look to PWSA. We send out announcements as they're received. We do it through social. We post it in our newsletters. So you can kind of keep an eye on the website for the trial, and also kind of keep an eye on what we're doing on social. So as the sites are opening up, we're all letting you know. Okay, this is a popular question. It's been asked a couple times. How do you assess hyperphagia? How is hyperphagia evaluated?
Well, the main way hyperphagia is evaluated is by the clinician, by the physician, getting the history when you tell them what's going on with your loved one who has hyperphagia, PWS. There's also a questionnaire you fill out about hyperphagia, where you rate things about some of the symptoms.
Okay. Another question. Okay, there's a typo in here, so it may not come across correctly. Are there no other forms? It says, are there no other form? Does it have side effects for those with asthma? I think is what the question is trying to ask.
So in a situation, if someone has asthma, it just really depends, obviously, what other medical conditions they have, how serious the asthma is, and so on. So there's not a lot of data, especially on carbetocin nasal spray in people with asthma. That would be just something when you go to the investigative site and you meet the doctor, you would go over how bad the asthma is, what are the other medical problems, what medications the person on, and work out with the doctor whether it makes sense to do.
So is it safe to say that, I mean, you have to have a conversation with your physician or with your child's physician to make sure that this is right for you?
Absolutely.
Okay. When will Boston open?
I don't know when Boston will open. We're working with all these sites and to get them open as soon as we can, but hopefully soon, but I don't have a date, unfortunately.
Why is this in the form of a nasal spray, and why is it best to give with meals?
So it's in the form of a nasal spray because where we want the drug to get is into the brain, and it's easiest, actually, there's a passageway through as nasal spray. There's a passageway through to the brain, through the nose, to get the carbetocin there in the most efficient way with the least amount of carbetocin in the rest of the body where it's not really necessary. And what was the second part of the question?
Hold, please. The second part of the question was, why does it need to coincide with meals?
Okay, the way we've done it is we want it to be given with meals if possible. We think, possibly it will help with hyperphagia more if it's given at the time when their symptoms of hyperphagia may be toughest to deal with, but it's not absolutely necessary that it be at least.
Okay. Okay. Have you seen any effects on social behaviors?
So in the study that was done by Levo, they had what we call secondary endpoints, where I don't know if you would call it social behavior so much as anxiousness. They tried to assess anxiousness. And there was some evidence that suggests that maybe there's some benefit in anxiousness.
Great. How can hyperphagia be controlled?
Well, you probably know more about it than I do, as far as the overall kind of strategies of controlling hyperphagia.
I'm guessing they're talking a little bit more about the mechanism, but that's a little bit scientific. The question wasn't clear, it was more of a statement. So I don't know, I know that in your presentation it spoke a little bit about how carbetocin can help affect the hunger. I just can't remember.
Right. Remember, there is in the presentation it talked about there's a hormone called oxytocin,
Right.
and oxytocin is low in people with Prader-Willi syndrome. And low oxytocin often goes along with having an increased appetite. And so what we think is that if you have that more oxytocin, that helps decrease the hyperphagia. And what carbetocin is, it's very similar to oxytocin. In fact, it actually activates what we call oxytocin receptors even more strongly than oxytocin. So that's how we think it works, by activating oxytocin receptors on the cell.
So that actually rolls into our next question, which is a really good point. A lot of our folks with PWS don't inhale very well. Does that matter if they don't do a good inhale?
Well, in order to use the drug, they have to be able to use a nasal spray. So, if they can't use a nasal spray, then that would be difficult to use this drug.
Is there a way to determine if they're using the inhaler correctly?
I think we would rely on you all to know the person with PWS and to get a sense if it's actually going in the numbers.
Okay. Okay, is the dose based on age, weight, or a combination of both?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, it's one dose for all ages and
One dose for everyone. Okay.
well, low dose that we were talking about that was studied by Levo Therapeutics.
Perfect.
Study, they had people ages 7 to 19, all different kinds of weights. And it seemed to suggest that the low dose worked, even though there was a variety.
Okay. All right. What side effects might this have on our loved ones?
Yeah, again, the most common things, there were headache and flushing. Those were the things that really stood out.
Headache, and I'm so sorry. It was Jim, it was still hard to hear a little bit there. It was headache and flushed.
Redness in the face.
Okay. Okay. Is oxytocin measured in some way during recruitment for the study, or do you just assume they are low in people with PWS?
No, we do not measure oxytocin. We assume, we think that people that it is low in people with hyperphagia.
Okay. What about any possible long-term effects on people? It says, are there any long-term effects on people? And when abused, what might be the solution?
So there, Levo did a study, an open label extension study, as we discussed, where people took carbetocin nasal spray for some of them for a year or more. And, some people had side effects, but there wasn't any, except for a headache, there wasn't anything that really stood out as a very common side. So the fact is, to answer that question, what are the long-term effects? We don't really know yet. We are doing the study to find out what are the long-term effects. The study, it's still, as I said, it's still an investigational product. That means it's a product not approved by FDA. We're still gathering information about it to really understand what could be the short term.
Do the nasal passages become irritated? And if so, does saline spray help?
Nasal passages could possibly become irritated. And yes, saline spray might help, but that saline spray might also interfere with the carbetocin nasal spray, so they wouldn't be used at the same time.
Okay. All right, that's interesting. Hold on. Aside from being inhaled, is there any other form of this drug admission to patients? I think they're asking, is there another way the drug can be administered?
In this study, it's only nasal spray.
It's only nasal spray. Okay. Okay. Hold on. Oh, I'm sorry, give me 1 second. How long do you have to take the medication? I believe it's 3 times, correct? 3 times a day?
3 times a day. Yeah.
Okay, great. Do we know why the lower dose works?
So we don't really fully understand why the lower dose seemed to work and the upper dose, the higher dose did not seem to work. From what we understand from experts in endocrinology, sometimes that happens with hormones, where there's a certain dose that's the sweet spot, and then when you go with a higher dose, it doesn't work as well. So that's what it seems. It seems like it's happening here, but we don't really understand it.
Okay. Would this be a lifelong medication?
So that right now we're at the point where we are just trying to see if it works for hyperphagia and trying to gather data on people taking it for a long time. So if we have good data that shows that it works and it's safe, and then it gets approved by FDA, that's an if it gets approved by FDA, then we would have more information and be able to say more about it. And that would be something you would decide to do about how long it would be used.
Okay. Can you please go back over the exclusion criteria?
I can show that slide. I'm not sharing anymore, am I? But I can. So there are many inclusion/exclusion criteria that you would have to go over with the doctor and the nurse and people at the investigative site. But the main things are to be in the study, you have to be between 5 and 30 years old. You have to have Prader-Willi syndrome. You have to have hyperphagia. You have to have a mutation that documentation that you have a mutation that goes along with Prader-Willi. And then you can't have, as we said a little earlier, you can't have an upper respiratory infection at the time. You can't have a cold or a sore throat at the time you're entering the study. You can't be you can't have been in another research study within the previous 6 months. And you can't have had a new food-related intervention, like a new kind of program that started within the previous month.
So I actually have a follow-up question to that. So I know that you just said you can't have a cold or an upper respiratory infection when you're participating. What happens if your child is participating and then they get sick in the middle of their participation?
Yeah, that's different. That happens, and there's nothing we can do about that. But we don't want to start the treatment while somebody has an upper respiratory infection.
Okay. Would an individual that also has epilepsy be disqualified from being able to use this medication?
That would be if the medication is approved by FDA, that would be something that we would know about at the time it was approved by FDA.
Okay, so if you have epilepsy, that you're unable to participate. However, if the drug is approved by FDA, that would be a decision made between the physician and the patient. Is that correct?
Yeah, and FDA may say something about it. We don't know. We have to find out what happens in the study.
There must be food seeking, not just hyperphagia without seeking food.
Right, the food seeking behavior has to be part of the problem that's going on.
Okay, so food seeking has to be a part of it.
Right.
Okay. What if my child is on other medications?
There are just a few medications that you cannot be taking. Oxytocin is one. Tesofensine is another one. There are medication class called prostaglandins. You can't be taking that. But there are very few medications that you cannot take.
Do you have to be taking growth hormone?
No, you do not have to be taking growth hormone. You can be in the study whether you're taking growth hormone or not.
Can you be living, can you, hold on one moment. Do you have to be living at home or can you be living in a group home?
No, you can be in the study if you're in a group home, as long as there's, a caregiver who can fill in the questionnaires, because they know you well enough.
Okay, so I guess would it be safe to say, if you're living in a group home and you're interested in participating in the trial, that's a conversation to have with your physician and the trial site to make sure that that consistency can be maintained throughout the process?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, great. Is there somewhere to find the questionnaire for hyperphagia?
It's probably you can find it online, or your doctor who treats Prader-Willi syndrome might have it. It's called the Hyperphagia Questionnaire for Clinical Trials.
Okay. How is hyperphagia assessed? Is it at the beginning and halfway through as well? So I'm guessing they're asking, is hyperphagia assessed throughout the process?
Yeah, hyperphagia is assessed at every visit to see how it's going.
Okay. This next question, I don't know that I understand it, so I'm going to read it as it's written. Hyperphagia, is it communicable? Can it be transferred to one who is close to the affected person? Hyperphagia isn't communicable, so I'm trying to figure out what this question means. Jim, maybe I don't know if I'm reading it wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure. What
Okay. I'm gonna go back to that. If I read that wrong, please forgive me. And see if you maybe retype it and see if we can answer it that way. Okay, while on this medication, is it advisable to take multivitamins?
It's not necessary to take multivitamins. It's okay to take multivitamins.
Okay.
Jim, I have a quick question. So we talked a little bit about how you couldn't start with having a cold, but as we go into recruitment during flu season, can you get vaccinated for the flu or for RSV while you're in the trial?
Yes, you can. Yeah, I mean, when you're in the study, you should go ahead and get, whatever medical treatment is appropriate.
Great, thank you.
So that I would imagine that would be the COVID vaccine also, right?
Whatever you and your healthcare providers decide is appropriate, you can get. And if you have any questions, you can always ask the study physician if it's okay. But you need to live your life and get treatment.
I like that. You live your life. Okay. If I get the placebo, can I get the drug later? I think we're referring to open label.
Yeah, that's an important question. So if the participant gets placebo during the first 12 weeks, then after that, they can enter another study where everybody gets the drug. And that's the study we call an open label extension. We call it open label, meaning that you know what the label is on it. You know what that you're getting the drug.
Okay. Who would be administering the drug? Would it be a psychiatrist or an endo? And I'm guessing this is assuming FDA approval.
Well, if after FDA approval, then the drug could be prescribed probably by any doctor.
Okay.
But that's for, again, all the questions about what would happen after FDA approval are hard to answer. It just depends what FDA says.
Right, right. Will my child have access? Will my child have access to this drug after the study is completed? I'm guessing that's also an open label question.
Right. So if your child finishes the 12-week study, the main study, then they go into the open label extension and they get drug. They get carbetocin nasal spray for sure. And that study is planned to run for up to 3 years.
For up to 3 years. Okay, that's great. I have kind of a repeat, but let's see if we can answer it again. Maybe it was difficult to hear. Why is it taken at meals? Does it work that quickly?
So we think it might help more when it's taken at meals. As I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be taken at mealtime. The way we've put it is it should be taken at mealtime if possible.
Okay. They just keep coming. Do you find out if you're on the placebo or the drug at the end of the trial?
You don't find out right when you finish the main trial. You may find out later.
Okay. So maybe yes, maybe no.
Well, you don't find out right away. You wouldn't find out while you were still in the trials. That would probably come much later.
Okay. When do you anticipate completion of enrollment?
Well, we would hope to complete it sometime in 2025 or if necessary, early 2026, but we were hoping 2025.
Okay. Okay, hold on. Questions are coming in all over my screen here. How many international sites do you anticipate having?
I don't know the number off the top of my head. Most of the sites will be in the United States, but the number in Europe is going to vary depending on getting approvals in the different countries in Europe.
Okay. And this is just me asking. So the 170 people requirement, is that a number for international and US sites, or is that just US sites total?
No, 170 includes all the sites.
Includes all the sites, so international sites as well?
Right. The whole study is going to have 170 patients.
Great. Okay. Hold on, let me skip around over here. Can my child be on this trial if they're taking another FDA-approved medication for Prader-Willi syndrome?
Well, if they're taking, for example, growth hormone, they can be on the study. Yes.
This is okay. I actually think we're done. I don't have any other questions coming through. Let me just, I'm getting them in Messenger, I'm getting them in my phone, I'm getting them everywhere.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dorothea, for doing the questions and for traffic control here.
I like that, traffic control. We're doing a better job than TSA, right? Or Delta at least. And I believe we answered this one. Yeah, financial assistance. I believe financial assistance is available for the study, correct, Jim?
Yes, that depends on the site. It depends on every particular institution, what the financial assistance is as far as, but I don't know if that's alluding also to, as I mentioned before, there is support for traveling to the site.
Okay. So folks, if that's something that you're interested in, you know, definitely speak with the site, and kind of work that out, with the site. I imagine that the site will be in charge of making sure that all of that is handled correctly.
I don't think I mentioned, maybe you mentioned it, Dorothea. If you go to the CompassPWS.com website, there's a place where it shows the sites, and there's also a way to contact somebody to help you make contact with the site.
As a matter of fact, folks, those of you who are here probably know that I have a 6-year-old who will be 7 on Thursday, living with PWS. I actually went through that process myself. So if you go to the Compass site and you fill out the questionnaire, you will get a confirmation email and somebody will be in contact with you. It's a really simple process. So they've made it really, really easy for us. Another question, could you please provide an update on the drug's efficacy for patients based on the available data?
Yes, so the available data is the one study that was conducted by Levo Therapeutics. Well, there was another shorter study, but in the main study conducted by Levo, it was an 8-week study, and there they tested a high dose, a low dose, compared them to placebo. And they found that the high dose did not really seem to work compared to placebo, but the low dose after 8 weeks, there was a difference between the drug and placebo.
Okay, folks, if there aren't any other questions, you know, and as I can say as a parent, you know, Jim, thank you so much, and thank you to all of you from Acadia for being here for our families, and working to give our kids a better quality of life. So I know that I'm not alone when I say I'm eternally grateful for the work that you guys are doing. So thank you again, and you're getting thank yous in the chat. Will there be any rewards?
Thank you, Dorothea and Stacy, for inviting us and for hosting us, and to everybody for attending and for, you know, considering the study or at least wanting to learn more about the study. So really appreciate your time.